Okay, right. Welcome back to Sanhedrin. We stopped over here. Let's share the screen straight away. And there we go. Hopefully you should see that now. We are on page 88, Michael, if you're looking for the place. 16b, 3 if you're in an art scroll. It's on the screen. Actually, it's at the bottom of page 87, Michael. I told you a fib there. And this is where we are going to start from. The Mishnah has, up until now, the last few bits of the Gemarah we've been doing, has been the Mishnah telling us all the things that required a 71-man Beis Din to function it. And one of these things was an Ir Hanidachat, the subversive or idolatrous city. And just to remind ourselves what we're talking about, I am going to put on the screen the pasuk that we're talking about. It's in Sefer Dvarim. It's in Parashat Re'eh. We're going to read it in a week or two. Is it on the screen now or not? It is. Okay, good. So, Jeffrey, verse 13 onwards, please.
If you hear in one of your cities which the Lord your God is giving you to dwell therein, saying, unfaithful men have gone forth from among you, and have led the inhabitants of their city astray, saying, let us go and worship other gods, which you have not known. Then you shall inquire, investigate, and ask thoroughly, and behold, it is true, the matter is certain, that such abomination has been committed in your midst. You shall surely strike down the inhabitants of that city with the edge of the sword, destroy it with all that it is in it and its livestock with the edge of the sword. And you shall collect all its spoils into the midst of its open square, and burn with fire the city and all its spoil completely for the Lord your God. And it shall be a heap of destruction forever, never to be rebuilt. Okay, let's stop there.
Okay, so that is the Ir Hanidachat. Now, if you read that, and I was to say to you, what's the subject that you've just read, Jeffrey, you would say that if there's a city where there's lots of idol worship, you have to thoroughly get rid of it. Okay, that's what it says. Okay, but what the Gemarah is going to do now, it's going to analyze almost every word that we've got in there and learn things out from it about the halachot of this city. I should say straight away that there is no recorded history ever in any of the Sfarim of an Ir Hanidachat, of an idolatrous town being completely burned and destroyed. It never happened.
It happened with Sodom, but Hashem did that.
Yeah, that was pre Matan Torah, before the giving of the Torah. You're right, Jeffrey, and that's, I suppose, if you like, that is what this is based on, isn't it? Yeah. This is the sort of post Matan Torah equivalent. Prior to that, God did it off his own bat, as it were, and destroyed Sodom. You could argue, I mean, I would not want to argue this, so please don't misinterpret what I'm saying. But what's going on in Rhodes at the moment is and in fact I read it online. Somebody actually described it as a biblical conflagration, whatever that word is, fire. a biblical fire. I mean, the place is horrendous. It's like Sodom and Gomorrah. It's been completely burned. Now, I'm not suggesting for one moment that the people in Rhodes are deserving of that. I'm certainly not. Don't get me wrong. But that's a natural natural disaster, and that you could argue is God's way of doing it. But here, this is the halacha of. Sorry, let me just interrupt. Mark, did you want to? No, okay. Sorry, I thought welcome to the shiur, but I thought perhaps you wanted to carry on the conversation about the Kinot book. Okay, fine. So we're talking about Ir Hanidachat, the idolatrous city, and so this is the halacha that God has given us as people, that if you find this one of these cities in Israel, then you have to destroy it completely. It never happened, and one of the reasons it never happened is because in order to actually fulfill this, you have various different criteria which are very difficult to establish. But the Gemarah is going to actually talk about where you can do it, how you can do it, and how many of these things are allowed to be. But just bear in mind that we're talking theoretically, because it never happened in history, or at least there's no recorded event that it ever happened. So having read all that stuff about the Ir Hanidachat, what you've got to do with it, it's an idol worshipping city, and you've got to thoroughly destroy it, all its spoil, all its livestock, everybody gets killed and burned, nothing is left, and never again can you build on that place. And that's an important part. So that's the background to the Gemarah. Let me see if I can put the Gemarah back up there. Is that got you the Gemarah back up? Yes. Okay. So here we are in the Gemarah. Let's go back to the Mishnah first and see what the Mishnah said. Go back to page 9, which I think is the Mishnah. Yes, here we go. Here is the Mishnah. Ein osin ir hanidachat ela al pi beit din shel shivim echad. An Ir Hanidachat, an idolatrous or subversive city, can only be designated through the Sanhedrin of 71 people. That's why we're talking about this now, because we've been talking previously about all the other things that require a 71-man Beis Din. So, for example, you'll remember if you want to expand the city of Jerusalem, if you want to expand the Azara, the courtyard of the Bet Mikdash, if you want to go out to a Milchemet Reshut, a war of a discretionary war, all of these things need the Bet Din of 71 people. And that's why we're talking now about this, because this subversive city needs 71 people. And then it goes on to say something which we're now going to deal with in the Gemarah. Ein osim ir hanidachat basafar. We do not make an Ir Hanidachat basafar, at the border, at the frontier, he says over here. Now, what that means exactly, where's the halacha here? A city on the frontier cannot be deemed an idolatrous city. Now, how close to the border that has to be, we might get to see in the Gemarah later on. But right now, what we can say is the Mishnah is telling us you can't make an Ir Hanidachat, you cannot designate a border town as a subversive and idolatrous city and destroy it. Okay? We'll come back to the reason why in the Gemarah. This is the Mishnah just says so. V'lo shalosh, and you cannot have 3 idolatrous cities. Now, what that means is open to interpretation. What does that mean? You can't have 3 at once, or you can't have 3 ever, or you can't have 3 in one place. You'll see the Gemarah debates this whole issue of what this means. But for the moment, the Mishnah, and by the way, this is why we need the Gemarah, because the Mishnah is shorthand. Rabbi Yehuda Nossi wrote this down expecting you to know from what he said what he meant. It's actually very difficult 1800 years later to know what he wanted. He said it was also difficult 400 years later, which is why the Gemarah came into play to explain to us what the Mishnah means. So far we've said the Mishnah says that an Ir Hanidachat, a subversive city, needs 71-man court, and you can't make it on the border, on the frontier, and you can't have 3 of them. Aval osin achat ushtaim, but you can make 1 or 2. Now, whatever that means, we're going to go into that in the Gemarah. So that's what the Mishnah says. Let's flick to the Gemarah now, which is on page 87 at the bottom. I'm just going to plug in my noise-cancelling earphones because the builders next door are drilling like bonkers. So just give me a sec. Right, can you hear me? Okay, good. Right, so let's go to the Mishnah. Ein osim. Where have we gone? There we go. Ein osim ir hanidachat, etc. We don't make this ir hanidachat. Initially, we said only because of this with the 71 judges, and we're going to ask our usual question: how do you know that? We've been asking this question all the way along. Every time we say you need 71 judges, we ask for a scriptural proof, and that's what we're doing here. Mana hani mili. How do you know? How do you know that? Where are these matters derived from? Amar Rav Chia bar Yosef. Rabbi Chia ben Yosef says, Amar Rabbi Oshaya, in his name. The Amar Kra, the pasuk says. By the way, Kra comes from the word Koreh, to read. Baal Koreh is a person who reads the Torah. Baal Koreh. So the Amar Kra is something that you read. What is it that you read? It's the Torah, the pasuk. So the Amar Kra, the pasuk says, V'hotzeta et ha'ish hahu, et o et ha'isha hahi, and you shall take out that man or that woman. Okay. Ish v'isha ata motzi lisharecha. You have to take out that man or that woman. What are we talking about here? We're talking about somebody who has caused the ir hanidachat, and you have to take them out lisharecha, to your gates. Now we've had this before as well, haven't we? What goes on at the gates? The Sanhedrin sits at the gates, the judge, the court. That's where everything took place. We spoke a little bit about it last time. We spoke about the idea that all the business deals were done at the gate. Any contracts were signed at the gates. For example, Avraham and Ephron, when Avraham purchased the cave of Machpelah, it was done at the gates of the city of Hebron. And the reason it's done at the gates is because that's where everyone is. But you don't take the entire city out to the gates. The judgment goes on where the Sanhedrin sits, or at the gates where the Sanhedrin is. So this pasuk, which tells us that you take the man or the woman who you're judging out to the gates, the implication there is that it is for the Sanhedrin to judge them. Now, we're not talking about the 71-man Sanhedrin here, are we? We're talking about the 23-man Sanhedrin, because that is what a single individual person is gets the death penalty with a 23-man judge court. But the implication there is that you have to. They are the people who do the ir hanidachat, who cause the ir hanidachat. They are judged by the great Sanhedrin, which you will find
at the gates of the city. Right. So now we're going to go into the next little bit now, which is that you cannot, ein osin ir hanidachat basafar. You cannot designate a city as an idolatrous city on the border. Why not? Without reading on. Michael, why not? Don't read on. Have a guess.
Because you're bound to have people from foreign lands there who worship idols.
All right. So, okay. So what you're saying is it's not fair because you're on the border. So, you know, you're on the border of Israel and Syria. Some of the Syrians are going to move over the border and come and live in that border town. And so you're going to have a bunch of idol worshippers. Well, that's possibly a reason why you should do it, to get rid of all the idol worships. That's the whole point. So no, I don't think I'm buying that one. Any other suggestions?
Maybe the people that are looking to kill you could come from the other side of the border.
Now we're talking. Now we're getting into the possibility. So what general characteristics does a border town have that a town in the middle of the city, of the country, does not have? Well, a border town, of course, is its your most vulnerable place to attack. Somebody who wants to attack Netanya has got to get either from the sea, because that's our border, but if they're not coming from the sea and they're coming from the land, they've got to get from all the way over the other side, which, if you don't count Judea and Samaria, is not very far, which is why we don't want to give back Judea and Samaria, because it is a buffer. Without the buffer of Judea and Samaria, we in Netanya are at what is known as the waste, not the waste as in rubbish, waste as in your tummy, the waste of the country. Now, that means they're talking about the waist of a thin person here, not the waist of a fat person, because the distance between the old border, the pre-1967 border, and the city of Netanya, anybody know what the distance is between the pre-1967 border and Netanya? Have a guess.
30 miles?
Nope. Much less.
10.
15 kilometers. That was about 10 miles, a little bit more. 15 kilometers. That's all. So that is the waste of the country. But you'd still have to go those 15 kilometers. Now, if you have a town right on the border, so for example, Kiryat Shmona in the north, Rosh Pinah in the north, or Sderot in the south, okay, they are the most vulnerable to attack. So you've got to be careful, because if you have a city, let's take Kiryat Shmona, for example. Anyway, I tell you what, let's get a map up. Let's find a map of Israel, Google Maps. There we go. Kiryat Shmona. Let's have a look. Kiryat Shmona. Shmona, I think it is, actually. There we go. Right. Okay. Can you see my map on the screen? Right. Okay. So here is Kiryat Shmona. Okay. See that there? Where my thing is? Now, right next to that, you can see a line here that my pointer is going along. Can you see that line? That is the border between Israel and Lebanon. So Kiryat Shmona, there's a picture of it looking out into Lebanon, I assume, because that's where you're looking out into. It's right on the border. Now imagine that Kiryat Shmona became an idolatrous city, and somebody comes along and says, I think you're an Ir Hanidachat. We're going to bring you to the 71-man Sanhedrin. Probably the 71-man Sanhedrin would come to them. And we're going to judge you. And if we find that you are a Ir Hanidachat, you're a subversive city, you're a city full of idol worshippers, we are going to destroy you. And we're going to completely raze it to the ground, exactly as we said over here in this pasuk. You shall surely strike down the inhabitants, you shall collect its spoil, burn with fire. It shall be a heap of destruction forever, never to be rebuilt. Right, so now what have you got over here on the border of Lebanon and Israel? Instead of Kiryat Shmona, you have nothing. You have an empty space. And what happens when you have a vacuum? A vacuum sucks in those things around it. So obviously, if you are at war or are at best at not at peace with this neighbor here on your border, if you have an Ir Hanidachat on the border and you destroy the entire city, you are absolutely inviting your enemy to walk across the border into the city that used to be, into the place that used to be the city of Kiryat Shmona. And of course, then they have a foothold in your country. So a border town has a very, very important function. It functions as the barrier between the outside people who are not your citizens, at best foreigners, and at worst your enemies, from coming into the country. So it's a practical reason that the Gemarah says you can't have a border town as an Ir Hanidachat. You cannot designate it. You can go over there and tell them you're a very naughty boy and you shouldn't be doing all these idol worship things, but you cannot designate it as an Ir Hanidachat, because once it's designated, then you have an obligation to fulfill these psukim, and you have to then destroy the whole place, strike down all the inhabitants. So you've got nobody there to man the border. You've got to destroy the whole place. It's never going to be rebuilt. It's a vacuum, and then your enemies come in, and that goes for any border town. So by the way, there you go. There's our waste of Netanya. A waste of Israel. Can you see where my pointer is now? There's Netanya. That broken line over there is, let's just zoom in a bit there. There's the border. There is the distance between Tulkarm, which is in the badly named West Bank, to Netanya. That is the waste, known as the waste of Israel, W-A-I-S-T of Israel, because it's very, very thin over there. Okay, so any of these other border towns would not be able to be designated as a Ir Hanidachat. Let's just go down here. We can see over here, there's Gaza, and you've got Sderot over here. It's a border town. That's the one we're most familiar with. You could not designate Sderot as a Ir Hanidachat, because you'll then be creating a vacuum into which the inhabitants of Gaza, who are our enemies, would come in. So let's go back to the Gemarah and see what it says. Ein osim Ir Hanidachat basfar. You do not designate a subversive city on the border. My tama. What's the reason? Okay, I've told you a practical reason, but the Gemarah is not satisfied with that. The Gemarah wants a scriptural proof. Now, there's a word in our psukim, which I'm going to go back to and show you in a minute, which both you and I did not take any notice of. And when I asked you to say, what's all this about? You said, well, if there's an Hanidacha, if there's an idolatrous city, you have to destroy it all. But as I said to you earlier, the Gemarah is going to analyze every single word. And it's found a word here that it doesn't really like. And it's saying to itself, I don't really need this word, mikir becha. And so I have to understand what it means. Let's go back to the Sukkim and see what it's got to say. Have you got it on the screen? So here we go. Jeffrey, read 13 and 14, please. You're muted.
If you hear in one of your cities, which the Lord your God is giving you to dwell therein, saying, unfaithful men have gone forth from among you, and have led the inhabitants of their city astray, saying, let us go and worship other gods, which you have not known.
Okay, so the word that the Gemarah doesn't like or is interpreting is that word there that I've highlighted, mikir becha, which translates as from among you. Now, why is the Gemarah highlighting that word? Because if you didn't have that word, it wouldn't change anything, seemingly. So, Jeffrey, read verse 14, but miss out the words that I've highlighted.
Unfaithful men have gone forth and have led the inhabitants of their city astray, saying, let us go and worship other gods, which you have not known.
That makes perfect sense. So the Gemarah says, well, if it makes perfect sense without the word mikir becha, then that word must be there to teach you something. Now, mikir becha means from within you. What's the root of that word, mikir becha? What word can you see in the middle of that? Okay, let's break it down. Mi is from, yeah? A mem at the beginning is from. Okay, we went out, Yatzanu mi Mitzrayim, from Mitzrayim. So mikir becha, to take out the mem, that means from. What's the cha at the end? What's lecha? Yes, Michael?
To you?
You, that's right. So the cha at the end is you. So mi is from, cha is you. And so what you're left with in the middle? Kuf reish bet. What does that say? How about karov? Kuf reish bet. Karov. What does karov mean? If you are mekarev somebody, if you are in kirov, what are you doing? If you're a kirov worker, what are you doing? You are bringing people near. You're making them from. So kirov means to bring near. Karov means near. It's the opposite of rachok, which means distant. So Jeffrey and I are krovim. We are relatives because we are close to one another, because we are cousins. So a relative is a karov. The word karov means close. So mikir becha means from within you, from the middle of you. So so that's why it's translated here from amongst you. Okay. So one way of understanding this word would be unfaithful men have gone forth from among you. So in order for it to be a ir hanidachat, it has to have been led astray by one of your own.
Jeez.
In other words, not what you said, Michael, the idol worshippers that have come from over the border. Okay, so mikir becha here means from one of you. That's one explanation. But the Gemarah gives us something else. Let's go back to the Gemarah. Okay, the Gemarah says, mikir becha amar rachmana. The word says, Mikirbecha, Rachmana means the merciful one, i.e. God. God has said in his Torah, Mikirbecha, from within you, from within your ranks, from the middle of you, as it were, from the midst of you. He says here, from your midst. Midst. It's an old-fashioned word. When did you last use the word midst in general conversation? Probably not very often, but we know what it means. Certain worthless people have gone out from your midst. That's a better translation in a way than what we had on the screen, from among you, because it gives the idea that from your midst, from where is your midst, by the way? Your midst is in the middle of you. That's what the word is from. Midst means the middle. That's in an old-fashioned English word for middle, midst. Okay, midships. Where's midships? Amidships, in the middle. So midst means middle. So the Gemara here is trying to fetch out from this word mikir becha that this ir hanidacha, this subversive city, can only be mikir becha, in your midst, in the middle of the city, velo min hasafar, and not from the border. Okay, the reason why is that we've just said so, is the practical reason. But the scriptural proof, the Gemara learns out from this word here, that we have established we don't really need it to understand the meaning of the psukim, because when Jeffrey read it out, missing that out, it certainly made perfect sense. So the Gemara has got much more powers of observation than we have, and noticed that there was this word that was apparently superfluous, and therefore interprets this word appropriately and says it's telling you that your ir hanidachat can only be in the middle of the country. Now, I don't think it means like bang in the middle. It means not at the border. That's what the Gemara says. Okay. So let's go back to the Gemara.
Mid-wicket.
Mid-wicket, indeed. Yes, mid-wicket. Correct. Where is mid-wicket? Mid-wicket is mid-wicket, in the between the two sets of stumps on the leg side. Okay, that is mid-wicket. Deep mid-wicket is mid-wicket on the boundary. Okay, let's not go there because we'll get all upset about the weather in Manchester. Okay, so let's have a look and see what the Gemara now says. Now, remember, we had the Mishnah that said you cannot have 3 subversive cities. Why not? Why can't you have 3 subversive cities? Why can you only have 1 or 2? Well, the Gemara is going to tell us in a little while, and I hope we'll get to that, because it's actually, there's a great little etymological word that I want to share. Yes, it's in the next paragraph. Okay, so we'll come to that. So the Gemara is now asking us to find a scriptural proof for the fact that you can't have 3 subversive cities. So we need a scriptural proof. So we better go back to the Pasuk. Now, read verses 13 and 14 for us again, Jeffrey.
If you hear in one of your cities which the Lord your God is giving you to dwell therein, saying, unfaithful men have gone forth from among you, and have led the inhabitants of their city astray, saying, let us go and worship other gods, which you have not known.
Okay, right. Where in that sentence do you see a word which indicates that you cannot have 3 cities which are subversive?
The implication there is you're only talking about one city of one of your cities.
Yes, exactly, Michael. Well done. You have spotted the word that the Gemara is interested in. that word there, which I've highlighted, ki tishma, if you will hear, be'achat arecha, in one of your cities. It doesn't say if you will hear in any of your cities. It says be'achat arecha, because it could have said ki tishma be'arecha, if you will hear in a city of yours, but it says be'achat arecha. Now, if I was to ask Jeffrey to read this and to say, instead of saying one of your cities, you were to read, if you hear in a city, so it could have said, if you hear in a city, but it says in one of your cities. So the Gemara says, dichtiv, as it is written, achat, one of your cities. And then it says, well, hang on a minute. If it says one, I've got a problem with the Mishnah. Why two, as Michael just mouthed? Let's just whiz back to the Mishnah for a second. The Mishnah says, Ein osim here bisfar. You don't make a subversive town on the border. Velo shalosh, and not three. Aval osin achat or shtaim. But you can make one or two. So it says one. Well, okay, I'm persuaded that one is not three, but I'm not persuaded that that word achat also can mean shtaim, two. Surely it's either one or it's not one. I understand that three isn't one, but two isn't one either. So how can the Gemara say, and the Mishnah say, in fact, you can't have three, but you can have one or two, and then the Gemara learns that from the word one? It makes sense. Where is the Gemara going to learn the fact that you can have two as well as one? Any ideas? Okay, let's whiz back to the Gemara and see. There we go. Dichtiv. So achat. Say dichtiv arecha. Okay. Aval osin achat or shtaim. But you can make one or two. Okay. And then it says arecha. Arecha is plural. In one of your cities. Okay. So one of your plural cities. Now, in English, you can't say any other way. But in Hebrew, you can. Let's go back to the Pasuk and see what it says. It says, Be'achat arecha, in one of your cities. And you see the word cities is in plural. In English, you could only say, if you hear in a city, ki tishma be'ir, you could have said in Hebrew. And in English, you could say, if you hear about a city. Now, in English, in one of your cities sounds much better than in a city. But in Hebrew, it would just as easily be ki tishma be'ir, if you hear in a city. The fact that it says achat arecha, in one of your cities, the Gemara it's a bit of a kvetch, to be honest, but the Gemara is therefore saying we've got the word achat, that's one. So that teaches us that you can have one subversive city, but the word arecha is plural, and therefore plural means two. But you can't have three, achat velo shalosh. You can have one because of achat, you can have two because of arecha, but you cannot have three. Says the Gemara. Okay. What does that mean? You can't have three, but you can have one or two. Ata omer achat velo shalosh. You say one, but not three. Or eino ela achat velo shtayim. So does that not mean that it's one but not two? So the arecha is the plural. Ha ma ani mekayem achat, achat velo shalosh. So that is one but not three, but yes, two. So you can have two subversive cities because the pasuk says arecha. Now, without looking on, I shall just take that down so you can't cheat. Without looking on, what could that possibly mean, that you can't have more than two subversive cities? What does it mean? You can't have two at once. You can't have two next to one another. You can't have two in the same century. You can't have two. What does it mean? You can't have two subversive cities. Any suggestions? What does it mean? Yes, Mark.
I suppose two is company, three is a crowd. I suppose the more subversive cities you have, I suppose the more upside down your society is. So perhaps they're designating that once you get more than three, the whole world becomes chaotic. I don't know.
Okay, I think that's an absolutely correct suggestion. We'll come to that in a moment because actually it's one of the Gemarah's suggestions. But that doesn't actually answer it answers a question, but I didn't ask that question. That answers the question as to why you can't have more than two. And the answer that Mark has given is because if you have three subversive cities, then you've got three empty places. The whole place is going to be desolate. You're going to have an empty place. You're going to have an empty country. You've got three cities which you've completely destroyed. But that doesn't answer the question that I asked, which is, what does it mean that you can't have more than two? Does it mean you can't have more than two at once? Does it mean that you can't have two in one area of the country? You can't. In other words, can you have one in the north and one in the south, and you can't have more than two in one area? Does it mean? What does it mean? Well, the Gemarah doesn't know that either. So the Gemarah is asking that question, and the answer is very peculiar because the Gemarah gives us the opinion of Rav. And Rav seems to contradict himself when he gives this opinion. So let's have a look at what Rav has got to say. Zimnin. Zimnin. What word can you see in the middle of that? Zimnin. What word can you see in the middle of that? Anyone? Jeffrey, what word can you see in the middle of this word zimnin? What's the root of that?
Zaman.
Zaman, yes. What does that mean?
Season.
It can mean season, yes.
Time.
Correct. Time or season, yes. Shechianu vikimanu vigianu lazman hazeh. We're thanking God for bringing us to this season or this time.
Zaman matan Toratenu.
Zaman matan Toratenu, the time of the giving of our Torah, correct. When I send out the timetable every week, if you get it in Hebrew, it is called a luz, which is short for what? Anybody know what luz is short for?
Luach Zaman.
Luach Zmanim, yes. Luach is a table, right? The luchot with the tablets of stone, right? Luach Zmanim is the table of times, timetable. Okay, so Zman means time. So Zimnin, at times, in other words, sometimes, Amar Rav would say, Bebet din echad hu de'ein osin. Okay, that one Beis Din, one Sanhedrin may not designate more than two idolatrous cities. So when I asked you, what does it mean you can't have more than two? Rav says, or sometimes says, that it means that one Sanhedrin. Now, what does that mean? There is only one Sanhedrin. It means one group of 71 judges. Okay, so you've got a Sanhedrin of 71 judges, and those 71 judges have got tenure. You can't boot them out. Once they're appointed as judges, they're judges, and that is the Sanhedrin.
Unless Netanyahu's in government.
Yes, potentially. Yes, I'm not sure whether that he would have the power. You know, I suppose Melech Bibi probably has got the power to do that as the king. Anyway, but one of the members of the Sanhedrin can die, and if their Sanhedrin, a member of the Sanhedrin dies, what happens?
Another one is elected in his place.
You replace him, and that then becomes considered a new Sanhedrin. So Rav says at this point, well, what this means is that you can't have two idolatrous cities. Means that one Sanhedrin, which has made two idolatrous cities already, cannot make a third. It's limited to two per Beit Din. One of the judges dies and a new one is elected. That slate is now clean. It's a bit like a new innings. Your DRS review system in the new innings, you get another three. You get another 3 chances to review the decisions. So when you have a new Beit Din, you get another 2 goes at making an idolatrous city.
But if you've got a Sanhedrin, a full Sanhedrin of 70 judges, they're going to turn over quite regularly.
I suppose so, because they're all going to be old, I imagine. Because
yeah, so you're going 2 or 3 every year at least.
Well, it could be. It could be. I mean, 71 people. How often do? Yeah, you're right. It could well be. It could well be that the Sanhedrin changes regularly. On the other hand, you might have a Sanhedrin that goes without a death for a few years. It's only 71 people. I mean,
as you said, they're all old people. So
yeah, they are. You're right. They are. They're generally going to be old, because by the time you've got to the experience to be elected onto the Sanhedrin, you're probably going to be old. So you're right. But all that means is that potentially you could have lots of ear hanidachats. Okay, but as we know, they never happened anyway. So a lot of this is, well, all of it is theoretical, but it's learning out the thing. So according to Rav, that's what it means. But if you have a turnover of Batei Din, then you can do it. Okay. V'zimnin of Amar Rav, and at other times, the same Rav said something different. And he said, Afilu b'shnayim u'shlosha Batei Dinin, la'olam ein osim. And at other times, Rav said, even if you have a change of Beit Din 2 or 3 times, you can't have more than 2 cities. So he goes, he contradicts himself, and that's why the Gemara says zimnin. Sometimes, at times he said X, and at times he said Y, which appears to be contradictory. Now, here we get to Mark's suggestion. And my Tama de Rav, what is the reason for Rav's opinion that you cannot have more than 2 designated idolatrous cities, even if you have a new Beit Din? Mishum karcha. Karcha. Okay. Because, now he translates it here as desolation, which is exactly what Mark said. You got all these cities that are destroyed. You got a complete balagan. You've got empty cities. You've got desolate areas of cities completely destroyed. Remember, if we go back to our pasuk, which we should know by now because Jeffrey's read it about 4 or 5 times, you've got to strike down the inhabitants. You've got to destroy it. You've got to burn it all in the open square. Over here in verse 17, it's a right mess. So if you have more than a couple of them, says Rav, you're going to have desolation. Now, this word karcha, which is translated as desolation, means something different in modern Hebrew, but it is connected. And this is the cute little bit of etymology I wanted to show you. Anybody know what karcha means in modern Hebrew? David, what does it mean?
Bald.
It does. It means bald. It means bald. No hair, like this. Oh. See? No hair. Bald. Karcha means bald. And if you look at the top of my head, what you will see is desolation. There is no hair. It's gone. It's empty. And that is the root of the word karcha. So here in the Gemara, you will have, it's telling you, Rav is telling you that we can't have more than 2 designated idolatrous cities because you'll have a bald patch in the city, in the country, and that's not good. And as Mark said, you end up with the breakdown of society. So that leads into Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish has a different opinion. Remember, we asked the question earlier on, what does it mean you can't have 2? Well, Rav has said you can't have 2 in a Beis Din's lifetime. And then he goes back and says you can't have 2 at all, even in 2 or 3 Beis Din's lifetime, because it'll cause too much desolation or baldness of the country. Reish Lakish has got a different idea. I'm a Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish said, Lo shanu ella. This is a lo ella sentence, which we've had many times. It means only. This was only taught. Lo shanu, from the word Mishnah, is taught. Lo shanu ella. This was only taught. B'makom echad, referring to one place, meaning geographical place. The country was basically split up into 3 sections as far as the Gemara was concerned. Do you know what the 3 sections were? Well, we'll see here in a moment. The 3 sections we're going to see here. Does it mention all 3? Or does it only mention 2 here? Hang on a sec. Yeah. Okay. So it only mentions 2 here, but there are 3 areas, because he says so. Aval bishnai mushlosham makomot osin. So what are the 3 areas? The country of Israel. Let's go back to our map. Actually, that's a good idea. Let's go back to the map. Right. There's our map of Israel. The country was split up into basically 2 areas. One was known as Yerushalayim, and that is basically anything, I suppose, south of Netanya, let's say, is called Yerushalayim. And this area up here in the north was known as, any ideas? What did they call that?
Galilee.
Galilee, that's right. Jesus country, okay? Galilee. So the 2 areas that the Gemara talks about here are the Galil, Galilee, and Yerushalayim. So it basically splits the country into north and south. But the Gemara talks about a 3rd part of the country. And what do you think that is?
2.5 tribes.
Yes, well done, Michael. It's called Aver Hayardain. Aver. Ayin bet reish. Aver means over the other side. Aver Hayardain. How would you say over the other side in fairly old-fashioned English? How would you say, oh, yes. So where is Aver Hayardain, Jeffrey?
Transjordan.
Transjordan, which of course does not exist anymore. It's now called Jordan. But in fact, its name prior to 1948 was Transjordan.
Yeah.
And Transjordan is, as the name suggests, on the other side, i.e. the east side of the River Jordan. The River Jordan is this broken line here on the screen that I'm going up and down with my pointer. So over here is Transjordan. And who lived in Transjordan, as Michael correctly said?
Reuven.
Yes,
Half Manasseh.
Reuven, Gad, and half of Manasseh. Correct. So, says, let's go back to the Gemara. Really fascinating Gemara, this. Amar Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish says he agrees with the concept of Rav's second statement, and he also agrees with Mark Baker that the reason that you can't have more than 2 idolatrous cities is because you'll make a balagan. But he says that's only in one place. If you have aval bishnaim or shlosha makomot or sin, but if it's in 2 or 3 places, then you can. So in other words, if you had one ir hanidachat over here, I don't know, let's say Akko, you made one in Akko, you made one in Ashkelon, and you made one in Amman. Okay, so you've got one in the Galil, one in Yerushalayim area, and one in Transjordan. That's 3. But you've not got a balagan because they are spread out. But if you make one in Akka, one in Nahariya, and one in Haifa, you've destroyed the entirety of the Galil coastline. There's nothing there. Same if you make Ashdod, Ashkelon, and Tel Aviv, or you make Yerushalayim and the cities are anywhere around, then you're going to have a balagan because you're going to have it all empty. So it's a practical reason. Rav's second statement accords with Reish Lakish. Let's go back to Gemara. Reish Lakish says, in Shnayim or Shlosha Makomot, in 2 or 3 areas of the country, osin. And Rabbi Yochanan says, ein osin mishum karcha. Even there, even if you split them up into 3 areas, Rabbi Yochanan doesn't like it. He says you're going to get baldness. You're going to have a bald country. You're going to have desolation. You can't do it, even in 2 or 3 places. Okay, so we're going to stop there because we're out of time. But what we're going to do next time is the Gemara is going to bring us a brisa, which is going to support Rabbi Yochanan's position. Rabbi Yochanan says, Ein osim mishum karcha. Even in the 3 different areas, you can't designate cities as idolatrous cities and make them desolate because of karcha, because of baldness, because of desolation. And the Gemara likes it to start with, and it's going to bring a support for Rabbi Yochanan's position from a brisa. Remember, a brisa is a sort of a Mishnah, didn't quite make it into the final version, got put on the cutting floor, but still has great power. And this brisa, Tanya Kvatei de Rabbi Yochanan, the Gemara is going to bring a brisa which is going to support Rabbi Yochanan, and we'll start there, Ezrat Hashem, next week. Any questions on today's shiur, on baldness, Zman, any of those things? Yes, Michael.
Isn't it possible that when you get to 3 cities, you've gone beyond the point of no return, and therefore there's no point in destroying the cities anymore because you already?
You mean there's too many? There's already too many idolaters.
There's too many. You've already destroyed the society, or Israel has been destroyed already. There's no point in destroying them further.
I think that's correct in as much as it's causing destruction, and I think that you can't go any further than that, because if you do, you are destroying the country. In other words, you're going to have to change the rules a bit here. I mean, it's a bit dangerous, this, because if you think about it, what we're actually saying is that you can have a city which is an idolatrous city, but you're not going to fill the Torah's obligation to destroy it because you need that city still. You can't destroy it because it's going to cause too much balagan and desolation, or it's on a border and you're going to allow your enemies in. So what have you got? You've got a subversive, idolatrous city, which you're not getting rid of. So in some ways, you've got to change the rules. And that's a bit dangerous, isn't it? Because who makes the rules? So in other words, this actually fits in a little bit, because there is a concept that the Rabbanan did not make a rule that nobody could keep. That it was impossible for people to keep. For example, we're coming up to Tisha B'Av. Today is the 8th of Av. When did the destruction of the temple occur? Mark, you're muted. You're still muted. You're still muted. Now you're not muted.
On the 10th?
Well, it was destroyed on the afternoon of the 9th, the evening of the 10th, in other words, the beginning of the 10th, right through, it continued to burn through till midday on the 10th. So the majority of the burning actually took place on the 10th, not on the 9th. And in fact, some of the restrictions of Tisha B'Av continue until midday on the 10th. So for example, you don't have your hair cut until the 10th after midday. You don't drink wine or eat meat until after the 10th on midday. Until midday on the 10th.
But there
unless it's Shabbat.
Right, I was about to say there's a leniency for Shabbos, right?
Yeah, unless it's Shabbat, correct. Actually, Tisha B'Av can't be on a Friday. But if it was, so you can't, the restrictions go on. So the question is, why do we fast on the 9th and not the 10th? Or both? We should fast on both the 9th and the 10th. The answer is we can't. It's hard enough to fast on one day. So the Rabbanan do not make a law that you can't keep. Same on Erev Yom Kippur. You know, you'll be very familiar with the halacha that my father used to love this one. It's a mitzvah to eat on Erev Yom Kippur. It's a great minhag that. It's a mitzvah to eat on Erev Yom Kippur. Why is it a mitzvah to eat on Erev Yom Kippur? So that you manage to go through Yom Kippur. But actually, Erev Yom Kippur is a very auspicious day. And really, we should fast on Erev Yom Kippur because we're coming up to Yom Kippur. We can't fast for 2 days. So we never made that gezerah. The Rabbanim never made a gezerah, never made a decree that we can't keep. And it may be that same idea that if there's so much of this going on and we're going to get desolation, we need to actually redefine what we're talking about. So it's a bit of a slippery slope in a way, because you can say, okay, well, I'm going to redefine what's an Ir Hanidachat, what's a subversive city. But the point is that practically, you can't have a country which is empty because you've gone around destroying your idolatrous cities. So, according to Rav, according to Reish Lakish, and especially according to Rabbi Yochanan, you can only have 1 or 2, and you can never make 3 cities. And we'll go on and continue that next time. Any other points or questions?
Just to point.
Oh, you've gone again, Mark.
Sorry, just to point out what I think you said at the beginning, although I joined late, which is this is all theoretical because we seem, I mean, generally throughout the Chumash and also into the Gemarah, we seem to be very good at talking the talk, but not walking the walk in terms of being able to destroy our enemies the way we're told to destroy our enemies, or destroy idolatrous cities the way we're told to destroy idolatrous cities. We just never get the job done, and it always comes to haunt us at the end of the day.
Absolutely correct, and in fact, that problem began right at the beginning of Tanakh, right at the beginning of Nach, I should say. If you look in Sefer Yoshua, as soon as we conquered the land, we never conquered the land. We didn't do it properly. We never ever did it properly.
Well, we're told to do it at the end of this week's Seder of Eschanan, right, with the 7 nations. We don't get it done.
Correct. We didn't get it done. We didn't get it done then. We haven't got it done since. We haven't done the destruction of the idolatries. Rav Stav, when he was here, gave a shiur on whether we actually want a halachic state and whether a halachic state is viable. And he brought, as part of his proof that it wasn't viable, all sorts of different steerers in the Tanakh and in the Gemarah about whether you have to have a religious police, and whether you beat the living daylights out of somebody who refuses to make a sukkah or refuses to bench lulav. With fascinating shiur. And of course, this Gemara takes a very practical approach. And ultimately, we have to take a practical approach. And the question arises, as Rav Stav posed, is there a lot of theory here that we will never ever put into practice? And that's important when we're talking about Tisha B'Av, because what are we really asking for? Do we really want the Beit HaMikdash again? Do we really want animal sacrifices? Do we really want all the stuff that went on in that Beit HaMikdash? I would suspect that the answer, that if most people are honest with themselves, is no, they don't. And we have to actually think what we do want and what it means, as opposed to just paying lip service to beating our chests and saying we want the Beit HaMikdash to be rebuilt.
Especially all those landlords in the Mamilla Mall who'll have to turn over their top shops to butchers.
Indeed, indeed. Or money lenders. Okay, we will leave it at that point. Tzom Kal to everybody. Mincha's at 2 o'clock and at 7:30 for us. We have tomorrow morning an explanatory kinot, and then at 6:15 we have a shir from Baruch Bagel before Mincha at 7:10. So see you then, and if not then, see you some other time.